Welcome to the first episode of the Advocado. I don't know. It's advocate and avocado. Seemed like a fun combination for advocate. Any take on it? We'll see. Anyways, so I guess this first episode will just be an introduction of the point of this, why I wanted to do this in the first place, and maybe a brief introduction. So our daughter, my wife and I, we gave birth to our first daughter back in 2012, and everything was going fine. And turns out she was born with Down syndrome, which we didn't actually find out until about 4 months later through genetic testing. I remember sitting in the room. It was a C-section. I remember sitting in the room with my wife during the procedure, and they brought her out, our daughter, when she was born, and they lifted her up. And the doctors were kind of looking at each other and kind of whispering, I don't see it. Oh, I see it for sure. And, oh, I don't think so. And which it was our first daughter, first time doing this myself. So I had no idea what was going on. And so I didn't think too much of it at the time. So it was typical firstborn, general baby stuff. We're in the hospital. Family came to visit. Friends came to visit. And on the second day, the nurses came into the room, asked our visitors to step out because they wanted to talk to my wife and I. And again, this was all normal for us, never having done it before. And so they sit us down, and they had a nurse, I believe, and like not a social worker, but like a specialist. And they said, we just wanted to talk to you privately and let you know that we think your daughter may have Down syndrome. And again, we weren't totally sure what that meant. The last 2 days, we were fawning over our beautiful new daughter, and talking about how beautiful she was and all our plans for her, and how excited we were. And so for them to say this to us, we were kind of shocked. And so they said, we have resources. We don't know for sure if this is even the case, and if it is, maybe it's mosaic, which means it's a lesser degree of Down syndrome. And so we said, oh, okay. And they gave some paperwork and said, okay, enjoy your day, and left the room. And so we were kind of left to digest this. And so we didn't really know what that meant. And I don't really remember much of the rest of that day, other than I was sleeping there on the little fold out chair that kind of becomes a bed that night in the room with my wife. And I think actually our daughter was being taken to the NICU because there were other issues going on. I remember trying to go to sleep that night thinking like, oh man, like all my dreams and stuff were shot. Like this was all taken away from her, our daughter, but I guess in a selfish way from myself as well, as kind of, how I saw her life being was now changing. And so I remember also thinking, what do we do so wrong? How do we mess up to be almost punished in this way? And I remember distinctly, almost as soon as that thought kind of was set in my mind, it being replaced with, what do we do so right to get blessed, essentially, with this daughter that was given to us as our responsibility to raise her. And that kind of changed a lot of my perspective on all of it. And so it kind of brought me around to kind of being excited about it, I guess, in a strange way. So going back, man, I don't know, 4 years, 5 years, maybe. I can't remember. Not that great with time. When my wife and I were first dating, I remember we were sitting in a TGI Fridays, as they were called at the time, just having dinner, and a couple tables over was a table full of special needs adults, and they were all just enjoying their time out, the same way everybody else does when we go out to dinner. We try to have fun. I just remember seeing their helper, the aide, with them as well. Just they were just all having such a great time, and just the sheer joy in their faces as all of them were enjoying the time out together, and just their experiences. And I remember thinking to myself, and I even said out loud to Rachel, I said, I'm going to do that one day. So I'm going to be somebody that can help out these individuals, these beautiful people that just the joy that they have, and just the way that life affects them differently, and the way they see life. And I knew at that point that I wanted to be a part of it. So fast forward, the few years, as we're sitting in the hospital, just getting the news that our daughter might have Down syndrome, it all came rushing back, and oh man, this is my opportunity. Like I'm being given this chance to do this work, to be a part of it, to be able to help out these individuals, to be in that community. And all of a sudden I got really excited. Like this is it. Like, I wouldn't say this is my life's purpose, but like, this is a big deal. And over the next day or two, talking with my wife about all this, I think we both share the sentiment that like, well, shoot, what if she doesn't have Down syndrome? Like, what if she is typical now? It's like, we almost got ourselves so worked up the other way that we were excited for it. It turns out, we did get the genetic testing that came back that she does have Down syndrome, and they couldn't find out with the testing they did whether it was mosaic or not. And we said at that point, it doesn't make a difference either way. It is what it is. And that would have been the case whether she had Down syndrome or not. But she was showing the typical traits. She had the sandal gap in her toe, and that was the first thing we noticed in the hospital too. Was we said, look at her cute feet. Look at her big toe, kind of separates so far. That's so weird. Again, this being our first baby, not having been around newborns necessarily. We've been around babies, but newborns. Okay, maybe that's a newborn thing. I don't know. So we didn't think too much of it. But there were a couple other things in the hospital that were kind of strange. But that might be another topic. So over the next little while, couple months or so, we were having a lot of appointments and stuff. And one of the appointments that we had to have was, we were told that children born with Down syndrome have a 50% chance of having a heart defect. So they did a lot of tests in the hospital when she was born. And they said, yeah, we don't see anything. Everything looks and sounds right. But we're going to have you see a pediatric cardiologist just to be safe. Just a precaution. We know there's nothing wrong, but just to be safe. And so we ended up going. I think my wife went because I had to work. And I think she went to one appointment and everybody said, yeah, everything looks good, everything looks great. And so we ended up, that's what we'd tell people when we, quote, broke the news that, our daughter had Down syndrome. We'd say that, yes, she has Down syndrome, but at least she doesn't have the heart defect. So nothing to worry about. So I think we ended up going to another pediatric cardiologist appointment, and they did an EKG. And so I guess the tech did it. And again, this was my wife when I still ended up going to work, because I said, there's nothing to worry about. You go ahead and take care of it. She said they did the EKG, and the tech said, yeah, everything looks good. Then the doctor came in, the specialist, and he checked. And he said, no, look right here. And I guess he saw something nobody else did. And he said, no, there's definitely a leak. And wasn't sure what that meant. So I didn't know about this until I get a call at work, and my wife says, hey, I've got you on speakerphone with the doctor, the heart doctor. He's got something he wants to tell us. And so that's when he explained to us that she had a ASD and VSD. Oh man, I can't, atrial defect and venture, something rather. Essentially, it's a hole between the top two chambers and the lower two chambers of the heart. And he said those are going to need to be patched at some point. Maybe not right away, but probably within the first year or so. So yeah, she was going to need open heart surgery. And so we talked about it and stuff, and what this all meant, and we were kind of a little shocked because we were told, well, at least your heart's fine, which is kind of funny because the whole pregnancy we were told, yeah, your daughter's fine, everything's fine. My wife was 20, she's gonna kill me, 28 at the time, 28 at the time, and so she wasn't at risk or anything. And I think we even had the prenatal screening for Down syndrome, and they said, nope, everything looks good. So the whole pregnancy, we were told everything's great, everything's fine. Come to find out, your daughter is born with Down syndrome. Now we're told, at least the heart's fine, everything's fine with the heart. Now we're told, nope, there's a leak in the heart that's going to have to be repaired. And so we get a call from the doctor, the heart doctor, probably, a few weeks later, saying, I'm looking at this stuff and I think we need to do it sooner. And so we ended up scheduling an appointment to get her in at 6 months old. So we had to take our 6-month-old baby girl, our first child, in for heart surgery at 6 months old, open heart surgery. And that was tough. That was really hard. That'll that could be a whole separate episode itself as well. But so we ended up doing the heart surgery, and I think I developed separation anxiety because of that. Only one parent was allowed to stay overnight with her. And so I let my wife do that while I went home and took care of the dogs and in the house and everything else. So every night I had to leave my 6-month-old, our first child, with at the hospital. And that was that was probably the hardest thing I've ever had to do. And so I think because of that, I developed this, perhaps unhealthy attachment where I have a hard time even getting babysitters, just because I was forced to leave her at her most vulnerable time. Apparently it also became mine. And so that was really tough. So the heart surgery went well. We ended up being there for actually 3 weeks or so, 4 weeks, because stuff wasn't healing right. Things weren't going quite the way they wanted to, or that the doctors were hoping to see it. But we ended up getting out the day before Thanksgiving. We went in at the beginning of November and got out the day before Thanksgiving. So around that time, we celebrate Eva's heart anniversary. And we came home, everything did great. Therapies 3-4 times a week, physical therapies, occupational therapies. I don't think we were doing speech therapy at that point. She was 6 months old, but our time from then on was spent with therapies and doing all sorts of stuff with our daughter. And so she's 8 years old now. Heart's been doing really well. I know it's not always the case for these sort of situations, but her heart's doing really well. They're not seeing any issues. She gets checked. At first she was checked, I think every 6 months, then once a year. And now she's at the point where she, I think every 2 years or so. So we're due again soon. So we've been really great, medically, and everything's going well. But so Eva, our 8-year-old daughter with Down syndrome, she's become the reason that I've become the advocate that I have become. I guess, if that makes sense. We've had to deal with all sorts of things, medical stuff, school stuff. We actually had to take a school to mediation because we had issues with them wanting to put her, basically hold her back. She had to take basically kindergarten twice. And there's just been a lot of things that, we weren't even expecting to have to advocate for and fight for, that ended up becoming these big deals that took a lot of our energy. We had to learn a lot. We had to talk to a lot of people who've been through it. A lot of it we were the first time through. And it's just wild trying to bring a child up in what period? I assume it's just them, 50, 100, 1,000 years ago. You had to raise this little human being in in this world. And I mean, obviously, I can say, oh, it's really hard today. I imagine it was very hard for my parents and their parents. But I think it might be especially hard for those of us in situations with children with special needs. And with her being our first, it's made a lot of weird situations, I guess, where to us everything was normal. Like we'd have friends who have children say like, how do you do it? What was it like? I can't imagine doing it that way. And for us, it was just like, well, I mean, we didn't know any other way. To us, that was parenting. What do you mean it's not normal for your child to still be crawling at 2 or 3 years old, to not be able to communicate properly? We knew about milestones and where a child of that age should be. And we quickly threw out all those books because none of that seemed to apply to our child. We ended up having 2 more children after, 2 years apart each. So we've got a 6-year-old and a 4-year-old as well. And it's amazing to see them growing up together and kind of hitting milestones at the same time. And it's just kind of seeing those comparisons to a typical child versus a special needs child. And again, I mean, to us, this was our family. This was our first time doing it. I hadn't been a dad before. Rachel hadn't been a wife, she hadn't been a wife. She hadn't been a mother. And this being our first child, everything was a first. And so we were learning along with all of it. And obviously we're still learning. We always do. And so I don't know. I think we just kind of took it because she was our first as, we have nothing to compare it to. This isn't hard or easy to us. It is what it is. And so, I mean, I could imagine having a special needs child as a second, third, whatever down the line, it could be more difficult. Our first child reached these milestones at, age whatever, but our second child, third child, our child with special needs isn't. And I could see that being discouraging and upsetting perhaps. But I think that's the same with any children. And so it's kind of neat and kind of comparing. You shouldn't compare children, but I mean, we do it. We're parents. I mean, even non-parents compare children. Well, why isn't your child like that one? So in seeing Eva go through these stages, seeing her interact with her peers through school and friends from church and just the groups she plays in, it's neat seeing her develop and comparing it to the other children her age. And it's both exciting as a parent to see your child being accepted, but it's also discouraging to see your child not accepted, to see, I wouldn't even say necessarily rejected, but I mean, I've seen kids in play groups not want to play with her. Other kids have asked, why is she different? Why does she look different? And that can be heartbreaking, but at the same time, I mean, there's other things that happen too, where, she can't be a part of this cheer group, or she can't do gymnastics because her muscle tone's not good enough, or whatever reason. Even there was a stint with sort of modeling, and she was told, your child's beautiful, and all that people kind of say. But, unfortunately, we're not looking for that look. I don't know if that necessarily meant, a child with Down syndrome or just, our child in general. It's weird to, as you're growing, outside sources start telling you something different than what you're expecting. And so, it's easy to make those comparisons, and it's easy to, internally process all that stuff and make it worse than it really is. But, there's a lot of times where we do compare our children, and, it breaks our heart when, we see other children playing groups together. Or, I mean, Eva's 8 now. She should be riding her bike with the other kids down the street. and playing with them. And she can't keep up with them. She can't run as well as them. She can't ride a normal bike with them. My wife and I just got excited the other day because she was jumping and her feet were leaving the ground a little. And so for us, that was a big deal. And so, it's tough to kind of see these things, and, it kind of breaks your heart, and you want more for your child. You always want more for your child. You want better, more, a better life than you had, a better life than really you can give them. I think our expectations are often higher than what's realistic, which is a good thing. It's something to aim for. But, something I've realized a lot too is that a lot of the same fears of, rejection, or fears of not belonging to your peer group, or being, accepted into other groups. That same fear that I have for Eva, I have that for my other daughter and son as well. And when my 6-year-old comes home from school and says, the kids were playing on the playground, they wouldn't let me play with them, that breaks my heart just as much. Or, so-and-so picked on me. It was devastating when I saw that happening with Eva, where groups wouldn't, include her. And I don't know, it's probably not fair to say, but it probably broke my heart a little more so because, I think I was internalizing it, it's because she has special needs that they're not including her, and that's what her life's going to be, and this is the rest of her life, and what I'm going to do, her life's ruined. And, looking back, I don't think that's really the case. In fact, most kids, I don't even think they know necessarily why they wouldn't include her or whatever, or why she's different. It's just kids being kids. But, we have those same fears for all our children. And I think we need to advocate for all of our children. They're young children that can't advocate for themselves. And so whether it's at school or the group of friends, or maybe the grocery store, when another parent whispers something about your child. Oh, I'm sorry, did you have a question? Can I explain to you what this means, or what this is, or why she can't, or whatever it may be? I think we as parents are always advocating for our children, for ourselves. And I think, so that's what I want to kind of focus on with this whole podcast thing, is what we advocate for, why we advocate, who we advocate for, and just to kind of be a resource perhaps for support, for where to look for help, maybe, a shoulder for situations that we're not familiar with. I know there are a lot of times where, in the short 8 years so far, that I couldn't relate to any of my friends, or my friends couldn't relate to me, my situation. And, it's kind of like, well, you guys don't get it. Yes, you've got kids and you have a basic understanding, but what it means to have to fight a school system because they're saying your child's not smart enough, or, having to deal with 4 therapies a week because your daughter can't crawl. And so that's what I want this to be. And I plan to have, lots of people on, specialists, other people with similar situations and how they got through them, and just to be a resource for other advocados. I don't know if that's going to stick, but other advocates who've been in similar situations, and just to be a support and resource for one another, because that's what we need to be. So stay tuned for more episodes. Got a lot of really cool things planned, and yeah, we'll see where it goes. Till next time.